Let's take a look at aligning cultural values. Values are an essential topic in the development of cultural competence. Values underline the choices and decisions we make in our lives and work. They're fundamental to the strategies we craft in organizations, the way we manage, and the manner in which we let ourselves be managed. We can be aware of and be guided by our values. We can ignore them, or we can forget that we have them at all. But in nearly all cases, our values drive our behaviors and ultimately define us. Values are the operating principles for our lives. They guide and direct our behavior. Hofstede writes that values lie at the core of one's culture, and they are, in fact, the manifestation of culture itself. They are formed very early in life through your upbringing, through daily interactions with family and community, and unconscious modeling of life experience. Because you acquired them so early in life, you may be unable to easily recognize your values or talk about them. Noticing them sometimes takes encountering something that reminds you of what you consider right or wrong. The journey you are on requires you to understand the values that drive you every day. Their power lies in understanding their formation and influence, and harnessing values-based choices through reflection, focus, and practice. You are what you value, and how you consciously and strategically bring your values to life each day. On the surface, identifying your values seems quite simple, but identifying where they come from might be more complex. What if you were asked where your organization's values came from? You'd probably point to a vision or a mission statement, or a list of core values. But do they truly guide the behavior of the organization? Consider questions of national culture. What are your country's national values? From what were they derived? What kind of influence has your national culture had on your own values or your organization? When you're exploring your personal values, there are questions to consider. Do I strategically choose and intentionally use my values, or do I wait for them to kick in by themselves? What do I do when my values conflict? Maybe delivering profits and being kind are opposing tensions that cause you stress. Do your values change, and if so, what causes them to do so? Can you learn new values? How can you unlearn them? National and social values are driven by universal values that are common to all human beings. Organizations, all of which compete and cooperate across industries, are guided and influenced by the underlying industry's value. Because no person lives or acts alone, personal values are also affected by relational values, those values held by people with whom a person has a close relationship. Like most other aspects of business and life, values may shift in response to change. People, organizations, and nations all learn and grow, innovate and abandon, and succeed and fail in response to new conditions. And because we're also living and working in a highly connected and relational world today, any change that occurs in one part of an industry system, for example, will influence the other components of the greater ecosystem. Values change, and they provide people, organizations, and nations opportunities to both change and respond to it. Many environmental trends are impacting the development of culture and values today. Globalization has increased migration across national borders and encouraged development of multi-ethnic societies all over the world, making cultural diversity and plurality of values an everyday reality. Globalization has required new global policies to address the increased interdependence, influence, and international cooperation and integration needed around the world. Global consumerism threatens the diversity of national cultures and ethnic communities that we see in the variety of act and linguistics, history, artifacts, and symbols that make our world a rich and complex tapestry of difference. The increased migration and merging of cultural borders associated with globalization may be causing a crisis in the establishment of traditional identities and a reassessment of identities of both individuals and communities. The need to build relationships across organizational and national boundaries, borders, and cultures due to globalization and migration exists. The opportunity to promote the idea of sharing and building relationships, communities, and innovation across technological boundaries as a result of social media. The need to work together to promote comprehensive, sustainable development by preserving ecological, environmental, and cultural difference. The widening economic divide between rich and poor and the shrinking middle class in many economies. The ongoing realities of war, terrorism, and hatreds that are rooted in economic, cultural, religious, and values-based differences. The growing need for quality and consumer orientation in organizational strategy. People and organizations are influenced by the pervasive values of the nations in which we've lived or worked. Organizations are influenced by the home location of their headquarters and host locations of their subsidiaries, which differ in their identity, values, and institutions. All of these are rooted in history and affected by culture. A person's or country's identity may be explicitly seen in visible practices such as language, shared symbols, or rituals. Identity is not core to a nation's culture, as it may change as a result of more multicultural environments. Values, the implicit and hard to see for our immersion in the everyday existence, vary greatly between countries as they're intimately associated with culture and reflect the nation's collective software of the mind. Values are thought to be more related to a nation's institutional structures and functioning and are less prone to change than its identity. Many economists and sociologists also believe that institutions have a stronger role in influencing culture than values because they're both built upon, follow, and perpetuate historically based mental programs and adapt to local culture. Organizations too are affected by national culture, as management and leadership cultures do not exist, develop, operate, or even change in a vacuum. Cultures lie deep within all levels of a society, is guided by the unwritten rule for society's games of life, and is passed through on generations of society's people. The culture of societies, the social life within organizations, and the development of leaders' behaviors are all related. Most nations have been established according to constitutions, which are founded on their fundamental principles. They designate how the state may be governed, describe procedures for making laws, and define the limits of government by establishing the lines or fundamental rights that rulers cannot cross. The type of government established in a nation's constitution, therefore, lays a powerful foundation for its values system and changing political regimes. The Constitution of the Russian Federation, for example, was newly written for the independent state of Russia when Boris Yeltsin struggled with the Russian parliament for control of Russian politics in 1992. The United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights detail values in terms of the rights of the people and the government. Japan's constitution highly promoted Buddhism as a religion of peace and prosperity and outlined the morals and virtues expected of the emperor. As is happening in many countries, the Japanese government is debating updated language to better reflect today's realities and address external forces of change. A nation's constitution affects its behavior and lays the foundation for political, legal, and social infrastructure services that define and guide the behaviors and priorities of firms and people within its border. The laws in the United States, for example, promote the value of transparency. Public records, transactions, politics, and even business and financial dealings are relatively open. In China, most of these actions are relatively opaque. When two American companies have a dispute, they're able to sue, a practice less common in Japan. A nation's values influence the behavior of individuals and organizations located in its border. Let's first reiterate the difference between national and organizational culture. Hofstede described national culture as the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes members of one group from another. Organizational culture is the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes members of organization from each other. National culture is gained primarily during the first 10 years of a person's life, while organizational culture, consisting of the shared perceptions of daily practices in the firm, is learned when entering the workplace. Multinational firms are made up of people of all over the world, so their managers cannot assume that everyone shares common values. However, shared values are needed for multinationals to effectively function. How do firms then create shared values? The answer is not through membership in the firm, but through its hiring process. Shared values are assimilated from the national values an organization's employee base comes from. The assimilated values inspire the development of worldwide firm practices, which in turn are socialized through the ways in which the organization regards its symbols, heroes, and rituals. Value formation within an organization is possible, arising from a complex set of phenomenon, and is vital to the quest to develop a sustainable, competitive, and more human culture and create sustainable competitive advantage. This orientation allows a true leader to create shared culture and value creation that imply explicitly guiding the daily activities of employees at all levels and in all directions. When leaders manage by values, they humanize the firm's basic strategic vision and can compel the organization to move in alignment with its strategic direction and core values. Organizational values, therefore, define the organization's personality. Creating alignment between the values of individuals and their organizations is necessary for achieving high performance. Let's explore the ways in which the use of the management by values, or MBV system, helps create alignment between people and their organizational roles to maximize human and organizational performance. Typically, the owners of a firm are responsible for generating the overarching principles or values by which decisions are made and people in the firm behave. Those who manage the implementation of values are typically sandwiched between those who represent the firm's owners and the firm's employees. They are typically the senior executives and middle managers. The members of the organization are those who are asked to apply the organization's values in their jobs. When firms have built corresponding systems of rewards and punishments for compliance or non-compliance with values, members are more likely to use them in their jobs. However, if they personally agree with the values, and especially if they've participated in defining them, they'll be more likely to own them and powerfully apply them in everyday decisions. Alignment also needs to be made between the values of leaders, managers, and employees. When employees, for example, hear one thing from senior executives and see something different in real life, they'll be confused. To maximize the possibilities inherent in values and beliefs in their organizations, leaders need to ensure that they have built a full management system in which the values and beliefs of people at all levels are aligned. When alignment is achieved, people will perceive that their work makes sense and is worth doing. In fact, worth doing professionally and to the best of their ability regardless of any set minimum standard. The organization will be able to motivate creativity, maximize financial rewards, and achieve higher performance. Why do we need values-based organizations? What are their benefits, and how do we create them? Values are the social principles, goals, and standards that cultural members believe have intrinsic worth. They define what the members of a culture care about the most, which is revealed by people's priorities. The more important issue may not be the specific values that various organizational cultures hold, but rather the influence that cultural assumptions and values have on members' perceptions, behavior, and emotional states. This creates a form of energy, the energy of values-based work, that may be injected within and through the organization to create value for the firm and society. For this to happen, firms need to value their people as an essential resource for the organization. Some call people their human capital in order to symbolize the vital role that people play in creating wealth in the firm. Studies confirm that the way people are managed and developed delivers higher ROI than new technology, R&D, competitive strategy, or quality initiatives. Values form part of the power of knowledge because they guide daily behavior, provide cohesion, give direction to knowledge, and give meaning to the collective will. An organization's vitality and success, therefore, crucially depend on the development and employment of values such as creativity, initiative, vitality, confidence, courage, flexibility, and autonomy. When a firm is able to harmonize the benefits and values of its owners and its employees, values become a vital source of competitive advantage and societal change. Managers can enact the essence of being true leaders, which has always been marked by human values, as they guide the organization to build alignment between its strategic direction and its core values. The fullest outcome of operating by values in firms and society is the creation of wealth in its broadest definition. Organizations have always adopted management systems that fit the organizational context of their time. In the past, management may have focused on instructions or objectives. Organizations may have been trying to maintain production or optimize results. Now, organizations that want to survive and compete in this increasingly demanding, highly diversified, and dynamic marketplace recognize that the industrial management model that fit earlier times are no longer appropriate. Progress has meant different things in different eras, whether that meant economic progress or outcomes that are more core to our humanness or values. Today, leaders and managers are facing the biggest challenge in history: how to create and maintain successful organizations based on what's equally good for people, business, communities, and society. In order to do this, we'll need to use shared values to deliver shared values across the globe. Shaping, developing, and adequately rewarding the achievement of shared values is among the most important tasks of a leader and a manager. Given our complex times, organizations need everybody, not just decision makers at the top, to be able to solve problems using their own knowledge, skills, and creativity. We need managers who can lead bright, curious, talented, and highly educated professionals and knowledge workers, fostering creative, mutually respectful relationships. Individuals must be empathetic, respectful, and self-reflective, addressing all dimensions of cultural difference while still attending to the task at hand. This will create higher performing, more human organizations. The triaxial model of management by values represents the overlap between beliefs about conduct, efficiency, and fulfillment. The underlying assumption of the triaxial model is that values can be detected in all organizations regardless of their natures, missions, or visions. Organizations must identify their core values along with 3 dimensions of values: economic, pragmatic, ethic or social, and emotional developmental. Then, build a culture in alignment with these values and their objectives. Because all organizations are different and their organizational cultures can serve as a source of differentiation and competitive advantage, core values will always differ among organizations. For culture to align with the organization's core values and strategic objectives, most firms must undertake significant cultural re-engineering. Management by values has a distinct purpose: to simplify, to guide, and to secure commitment. Economic, pragmatic values are related to worth of what we feel is significant or important. They create alignment of behavior and priorities across an organization. This category includes values relating to efficiency, performance standards, and discipline, which may be used to guide activities such as planning and accounting. Ethical social values underline individuals' preferences and choices. They guide the way in which people behave in a group setting or in order to achieve a certain outcome. Emotional developmental values provide the motivation for achieving personal fulfillment. They cause people to feel that their lives are worth living, their careers are worth undertaking, and their organizations are worthy of their commitment. These values are related to trust, freedom, and happiness, and of course, they differ from person to person. Congruency between economic and emotional developmental fosters innovation in the organization. Congruence between the ethical, social, and emotional developmental fosters sensitivity and proactive social responsibility, and congruence between the economic and ethical social fosters organizational survival. The ultimate objective is to strike a balance between the 3 and use dialogue to identify, define, and ultimately get to the point of sharing and acting accordingly to the elected value combination. Think about your family or the families of others you know. We believe that our families run more smoothly. They have more peace, harmony, safety, security, and stability when the 2 family leaders share the most important values. When they disagree, what happens? Conflict, arguing, disharmony, and discord. This may be many words for the same thing. The development, like a family, like any other organization, has objectives. If the couple's objectives are their corresponding values, and they're not defined, aligned, or shared, the family is doomed to fail. Notice that the intertwined actions of dialogue and commitment not only resolve the disagreement, but also energize limitless potential for the relationship of the family environment. The same shared values are important in creating positive, sustainable relationships applied to your workplace. Sustaining culture change within any organization takes time, but it also can be transformative and extremely valuable. MBV has been used in numerous organizations to transform culture and maximize both human and organizational potential. The five-phase method of deliberate cultural change is designed so leaders, managers, and business professionals can work effectively together with values and the underlying cultural differences within their organizations. During this phase, phase 0, the sponsoring leader must assess whether he or she and the rest of the leadership and management team are ready to examine the firm's values and whether they're serious about implementation. In phase 1, organizational leaders will identify the existing values that guide decisions and behaviors. They'll reformulate their core values if needed, with the maximum level of participation across all levels of the organization. In phase 2, the new operating values are translated into changed working attitudes, work processes, work objectives, and work tasks. In phase 3, management will design a full spectrum of human resource policies and practices based on core values. And finally, in phase 5, management will implement an auditing process to monitor the progress of cultural change, including the degree to which the operational values are serving as lived values. First, you must assess your personal values and those of your organization and the degree to which they're aligned.